BrokeMan's.
Welcome to the BrokeMan's podcast. We ask that you like, comment, and subscribe if you are on YouTube so that we can continue to push our message out there and let people know that they are not alone and have these awkward and meaningful conversations that are needed. If you're on Spotify, please refer a friend, send it out. And on YouTube, the link below will take you to our store where you can purchase merchandise, hats, hoodies, t-shirts, crop tops, however you feel, to support the podcast and allow us to move forward and build more. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And if you have any topics for podcasts or any subjects that you want to be talked about on the podcast, please send us a comment, email us, send us a message on our Instagram. Go follow us on every social media platform. And when we get that message about a topic you would like to bring up, if you like, we will also mention your name. And then we will have that important conversation. Thank you for listening. All right. Welcome to the BrokeMan's podcast. We are here, we are alive, and we are thriving. Today, I have with me a special guest, Josh, whom I also work with and whom I've grown to like a lot. He's a very, very, very solid man, great dude, and he's there for people when he needs them. So today I'm grateful for having Josh here. He helps me out a lot with the podcast and everything else.
I'm grateful for all the people that I work with. We go through a lot of struggles where we work, and it's very nice to see us all come together when something happens and be able to work as a team.
Yes, and we did work as a team, when things happen. Today is going to be a good one. Today we are talking about, well, every time we have one is a good one, by the way, but today we are talking about addiction. And there are a lot of addictions in life, no matter how you take it, how you see it. It can be drugs, it could be the little things you do in life, but today we are talking about drugs. And we have a person here who's very familiar with addiction. I'm also familiar with addiction, but it's not drugs. But we'll let Josh take it from there.
So I used to be addicted to crack cocaine and then also Xanax prescription painkillers. Then that started about in 2014, 2015 is when I started getting into the harder drugs. And what had happened was my grandfather, who was the rock who taught me everything I know, he had passed away. And instead of processing through those emotions, I bottled those up. Because he had always said, when I die, I don't want you to cry, I want you to celebrate. So to me, I thought that's what I was doing. But I was actually just bottling them up. And instead of getting that release, I went to drugs as a release.
Question. What was your first drug that you were introduced to and when? How'd it happen?
Yep. So, like most people, the gateway is weed. A lot of people will say it's not. And so I was introduced by my cousin, my two cousins, and my sister. When I was 14, we were at my cousin's house. They were all in the basement. I was in my cousin's room, kind of like, what's going on? And then my sister's boyfriend came up and said, hey, come on down here. And I was like, all right, I'll come down. And they had a pipe and were like, hey, do you want to hit this? And I did. And at first I thought, well, this is pretty good, but I'm only going to do it once in a while. Like, special occasions, which it escalates,
So how did that being a gateway drug, how did that open the door up for crack cocaine?
Sure. So I started out smoking weed, and then I eventually became a dealer. And so I was dealing, and because of dealing, I was introduced to larger dealers who are always going to offer you other drugs, right?
Yeah.
They're going to try to upsell you on something. They're going to try to be like, hey, man, this stuff moves good. You should try this. And so, I started out with like pills, Molly, ecstasy, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It didn't really do anything for me. And then I would say after I graduated high school, I was introduced to cocaine first, and loved it immediately. Yeah, but at that time it wasn't so easy for me to get my hands on. And then I was introduced to prescription painkillers. It started with a muscle relaxer called Tramadol. My buddy in high school, his aunt used to get him for back pain, and he used to steal them from her. And so he'd give them to me in exchange for weed.
Okay.
And so I started taking those, and I was like, oh, man, I really like this feeling.
Yeah.
And so things kept progressing. I got further into the drug world, and I was kicked out of the house, and I went back to my mom. My parents had split up. My dad kicked me out of the house. I went back to my mom, and she was like, I think I know what can help you. I'm going to send you down to Florida to live with your grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was down there for 6 months. I got a job. I was in college. I got a vehicle. And every day it was like, I want to go back.
Yeah.
I want to do drugs.
So it was an everyday feeling?
Everyday feeling. It was like always in the back of my head when I first woke up, when I was going to bed. Throughout the day, not as much because you're busy.
Yes.
But whenever there's like a little downtime, you can start feeling it. And I just remember one time I was talking to my buddy, and it just came over me so much that I came up with a plan to move back to Wisconsin.
For drugs?
Mainly for drugs, yes. Yeah. I told everybody I was going up there for a job.
Yeah.
And the job was just a normal factory job that you can get anytime. So it was like nothing special. I just said that so people in my family weren't like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But I'm sure a lot of people knew what I was doing, because at that time I was only between 160 and 180 pounds.
How much weight so let's backtrack. Before you moved to Florida with your grandparents,
Yep.
Did you lose weight from the drugs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
So in high school, I was close to 300 pounds. And then sophomore to junior year, I started going to the Marine ROTC and was doing PT with them because my buddy was joining the Marines. And I dropped down to around 240, 230, like a healthier weight.
Okay.
And then everything happened. My grandpa derailed. And then as time went on, I lost more weight. And once I got to the cocaine, it just all came off.
Oh, man.
So, yeah. And I know people had an idea, but in my head, I'm like, no, nobody knows. Nobody knows. How can they know? I didn't tell anybody. But the signs are there.
There's a telltale sign.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you lose a ton of weight.
Yep.
For one, that's a huge sign for anything. But also, you're mostly going to be high a lot of the time. So you think you're having normal interactions.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it a lingering high?
It depends. Like, not from cocaine, but from like the prescription pills. Yeah. But a lot of times I would just go around people completely gone on whatever drug. I didn't care if I just did a line of cocaine or if I just popped Xanax. It didn't matter to me.
Really?
Yeah. I felt like I could handle it.
So does that, as you look back now and being so, you weren't self-aware of like how you were giving yourself off to people and their perspective of you, you just didn't care? Didn't care.
In the back of my head, I knew like most of the people that were around me were either because I sold drugs and they wanted those or because I had money. I kind of knew that and I kind of saw it, but at the same time, I didn't care.
No.
I only cared about getting high. That's all I cared about. And so when I came back, I only worked at that factory job for 2-3 months because, they have you up way in the morning, and I'm trying to stay up till 4 a.m. doing cocaine. It doesn't really work that way, All
right, welcome back. So you came down to Florida. You had a job.
Yep.
You didn't like it because you couldn't do cocaine at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
But take us from there.
All right, so I came back to Wisconsin. I was working at the factory, and that's when I started getting more and more into the cocaine.
Yeah.
And so eventually it was like I was doing cocaine, and then I was going to raves on the weekends, and
you were into it.
I was into it, and I remember it was like one Friday. I was talking to this guy I know that I'm not going to say the business, but he was a top manager at this place, and he was offering me a job to work there. And I was like, I don't know. I like the money I'm getting, but I don't like working this much because I'm trying to sell and do drugs. Okay, so I was like, it was Friday, and then all of a sudden I was at the factory job, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna have you guys come in for overtime on Saturday morning. And I was like, oh, that's not gonna work. I have a show tonight. Like, no, I'm gonna be up till 4 in the morning.
So you put your hedonism and impulsivities in front of your
My
yeah. So
life.
your responsibilities and your priorities.
gone. Who cares? I
gotta do cocaine.
Yeah, I gotta do cake. And I also had this really crazy mindset because I was selling drugs and I was making money. I thought that money just naturally would come in. I don't know why I thought this, but it was like, I don't need to worry about it. I'll somehow make money.
Yeah.
Because, like, when you're selling drugs, people think it's hard. It's super easy. Drugs sell themselves.
Yeah.
All you have to do is find the fiends.
Yeah.
And, like, when you're selling cocaine, you find 5, 10 cokeheads.
Question.
Okay.
Because I've seen this and I've worked with it. I've worked with a lot of people that have done cocaine.
Yeah.
I worked in restaurants. I worked in businesses and store, like all the sorts. And sometimes you will never know.
Yeah, sometimes you never know.
You have to be around them enough to know it now. And then when I realized, I can tell by the pupils.
Yep, the pupils are pretty much the dead giveaway.
I can tell by the pupils. I can tell by the pores.
Yes.
I can tell by the skin color.
Yep.
And I got really in tune to how they all act alike.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They all act alike. Yep. It's interesting because, like, when you do cocaine, people think like, oh, it's just this super rush. You're like ready to go.
Yeah.
It's not really like that. I remember this OG I was doing cocaine with. He explained. He goes, man, when you got good cocaine, you feel high. You feel good. And I was like, yeah, and you're right. And so that's what it was. Like, you don't feel like super amped up. You do. Yeah. You get that little burst energy, but it's like you feel high. It's a great feeling that nobody should try.
So I remember you telling me that you were doing You were doing the LSDs.
I was selling LSD.
Selling it while doing cocaine.
Yep.
Oh man! All right. So you have your family.
Yep.
And you have. How were things in high school when all this was happening and you were getting addicted to these newfound drugs?
So the family life was falling apart. Parents were very abusive, and they fought all the time. And it got to a point where my parents were getting a divorce. This would have been my senior year of high school. And so the family was just shattering.
How was it like to watch that?
It was very hard. The thing is, like, because I grew up with the constant fighting, I mean, just to say, when I was 8 years old, my dad knocked me unconscious for trying to stop him from putting kittens in a bag and drowning them in a river.
The anger.
So I was kind of accustomed to them fighting, and in my head, I wanted them to split apart because I thought it was going to be best for my younger siblings. When I started doing the ROTC stuff and was getting more healthy at that time, I started to, whenever I heard my dad arguing, I would get out there and fight him. Or if he was like hitting one of my siblings, I would step in. And then, of course, he would get violent with me. But to be honest, I tried to stay away from home as much as I could during that time because I was just too much into what I wanted. And it did kind of kill me because I was trying to help the family, but at the same time, I had felt like I was getting too much responsibility placed on me, and it shouldn't be my place.
Yeah, you're not the man of the house.
Yeah.
You are still a kid, adolescent, and you need to experience that, being that. Like when people say, you're the man in the house now. No, he's not. He's still a little boy.
Yep.
Still a boy. Still a teenager. He still needs to grow up.
Yep.
He still needs to be a kid and experience that. There is no.
It
doesn't happen. But there are broken homes all across America. Black, white, Spanish, Indian, like there's a lot of broken homes. And abuse doesn't just happen in the black homes, Spanish homes. They happen in all of them.
Yeah.
They do.
They do.
And a lot of unself-aware people, in my experience, men and women. It was men and women, but I can relate to that story of yours of one of my mom's boyfriends. I believe I was 3 years old, and I saw them fighting, like physically fighting
yeah.
and whatnot. And me, And being a boy, I'm like, you're not gonna. I think I was
Right.
3. I was
Yeah.
like, you're not gonna do this.
Mhm.
All I remember is taking me and tossing me across the room like a rag doll.
Yeah.
Then I woke up.
Yep.
I was like, oh, you knocked me out.
Yep.
I hit the wall, knocked me out, and it just
Yeah.
experiencing that. So trauma and broken homes are all across America. It's not just to one race.
No.
It happens a lot.
Yeah. Happens
But
to everybody.
it happens. Just so people know. People always think it's just this. It's just no. It's not. It happens everywhere, and it happens to everybody. And we as people are healing from that, and we are becoming self-aware and emotionally intelligent, so we can better, when we have kids, we can better raise them.
Yes. Yeah.
Be more aware. Be aware of what our parents didn't have. Our parents didn't have this huge gust of self-awareness and all this knowledge that we can find and that we're given.
Yeah.
And you can see that. You can see the difference.
Yeah,
between
definitely.
you can see the difference. Like back then, men weren't allowed to talk about their feelings.
No.
Men weren't allowed to grow and to learn and to enjoy beauty and enjoy art and write poetry and all these things. Like you're an outcast.
Yeah. You're an outcast. You're labeled as a freak in time.
Yeah, you don't talk. You don't talk about it. You just let it build all up
Yep.
inside, and you think that's what men are supposed to go through, but it's not.
It's not.
That's not how you build a strong man. That is not. So yes, we are learning.
Yes.
That is learning. And so yeah, I look at my parents and they're humans. They are humans. They're a man and a woman. Things happen.
Well, and that's the thing. A lot of kids and that become adults come from broken homes, and especially when it's an abusive home, they sometimes hold the grudges against their parents. And I completely understand where you're coming from, having that anger, but all life is all about forgiving and forgetting, because we're only here for so long. Sure, they did that wrong to you, but what's the point in holding that grudge? There's no going back.
It stops you.
Yeah, it
It stops
hinders
you from growing.
Yeah.
It does. I forgive. Do I forget? No, I learn.
Yeah.
I learn. I have to, because obviously you have to go back and address that trauma, and it never goes away.
No, it's
It
always
always
there.
comes up, and you got to learn how to deal with it. You got to put a stronger and stronger Band-Aid on, and you grow. You grow. So do I think about it all the time? I don't. I remember there was a time, man, it just wouldn't leave my brain.
Well, right.
And it will wear down on my body. It'll be on my face, and people will look at me. I'm just angry.
Yeah.
And I used to scare people away.
And you're like, what can I do to change? And it's like you were almost so far into it, you feel like you can't change, because it's like, how do I change after I've behaved this way for so long? And you have that shame that comes with it of, how do I face people again after I've pushed away so many people?
Did your addiction hurt anybody?
As far as like family and stuff?
Yes, push anybody away.
Well, I pushed most of my family away right towards the end of it, and then when I was first in recovery and rehabbing and everything, I stayed away from my family. I felt like I had destroyed all the family bonds I had.
How'd you get that back?
So it was a lot of work. Started just reaching out to my dad, because that one was one of the biggest ones. I was running a trap house out of the house our family home that he was trying to sell.
Oh, you were running a trap house?
Yes. And we had the police investigating us, and who would be happy about that?